event.
President Buhari welcomes the establishment of judicial panels to address issues raised by NSAS protesters.
Traditional rulers and elder statesmen urge NSAS protesters to stand down in the national interest.
National Human Rights inaugurates Committee on SARS.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall take a look at the NSAS protests and the way forward.
The NSAS protest of over 2 weeks came to a sharp turning point on Tuesday this week when multiple reports indicated an attack on unarmed protesters in the Lekki area of Lagos.
Now, many of the protesters at the Lekki Toll Plaza were injured, and there was at least one fatality, according to subsequent tweets by the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who made a broadcast yesterday and announced a shutdown of government activities for 3 days with flags to fly at half-mast.
Now, reports also indicate that the incident led to the burning down of several vehicles, public and private buildings, as well as infrastructure in Lagos and other parts of the country. Curfews were imposed on Lagos and further extended by 72 hours on Wednesday. Benin and Jos also imposed curfews on their cities, while the FCT administration placed a ban on protesters during the week.
Now, the NSAS protesters, among other demands, were primarily asking for the dissolution of the Federal Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, which had long been accused of unlawful arrest, torture, and in some cases, extrajudicial killings. Now, the government responded to that request with a ban on SARS, as well as a directive for the setting up of judicial panels of inquiry and restitution in the various states to address the concerns raised by the protesters, who are mostly young persons.
But the protesters insist that past attempts to disband SARS did not bring about the desired change in its operations, an issue the government says it is addressing in the new unit created to replace SARS. Traditional rulers, religious leaders, and statesmen such as former President Olusegun Obasanjo have called on the protesters to give peace a chance in the national interest.
Now, the unsavory developments have obviously left a scar on the nation, and that requires urgent actions to foster national healing and peace. Concerned persons says that the most important issue now is how to save Nigeria from this unfortunate turn of events. They also add that this is certainly not the time to trade blames, but a time to work together to preserve the labors of our heroes past. So, our attention on Good Morning Nigeria today is still on the NSAS protests and the way forward for the country. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Jumo Yusuf. I join my colleague Kingsley and welcome you to the program. We are transmitting on the network service of the NTA and we are live. Alongside the main discussion, we shall bring you our complimentary segments. Now let's take the morning news with Chimaobi Walter Inaji. Good morning, Chimaobi.
Hello, good morning, Jume, and good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. The establishment of judicial panels in states across Nigeria has received glowing accolades from President Muhammadu Buhari, who has over time stated his resolve to meet the demands of the NSAS protesters to address reported excesses of the defunct FSARS unit of the Nigeria Police. At the last count, no fewer than 13 states have gone ahead to establish the judicial panels of inquiry as resolved by the National Economic Council to address the question of redress and justice for victims of police brutality across the country. In the meantime, Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu has further extended the statewide curfew imposed on the state by 3 days to stem the tide of growing violence. The governor gave the order during his statewide broadcast to the people of the state.
At this time, I have directed further that we have an immediate suspension of all state activity for the next 3 days, except those that are connected with the governance of security in the state and the management of the current issue.
Now, Abuja, the FCT, has had its share of violence and destruction when peaceful NSAS protests were hijacked by hoodlums a few days ago. NTA's correspondent who went round the capital city this Wednesday, however, reports that calmness has returned.
It's been very peaceful today. At least I've gone around up to Banners, I've gone to Airport Road, like that. I've not seen any protest anywhere like that.
I believe we have peace now in Abuja.
And similarly, former President Olusegun Obasanjo has appealed to President Muhammadu Buhari in capacity as a parent of the youths and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces to restrain the military and other security agencies from using maximum force as a way of ending the crisis occasioned by the NSAS protests across the country.
The youth too, we want you to give peace a chance while making your legitimate demands. You must be mindful of miscreants who will infiltrate your ranks and give the protests a bad name, only so that trigger-happy forces will kill you.
And meanwhile, the National Council of Traditional Rulers of Nigeria has urged the protesting youths to give peace a chance, having noted their demands as germane. And in line with the National Human Rights Commission's mandate and in response to the nationwide agitation by some Nigerian youth groups, the Commission has constituted an 11-man independent investigative panel to look into allegations of human rights violation against the defunct FSARS and other units of the force. The committee is headed by a retired Supreme Court Judge, Justice Suleiman Galadima.
The Commission has already convened a stakeholders forum, which has 5 subcommittees to work on all aspects of police reforms to ensure that they can get the police force we want in Nigeria.
I emphasize and solicit for the cooperation of all stakeholders and assistance of you members of the fourth realm.
And now to other stories, the Federal Executive Council has approved the ratification of Nigeria's membership of the International Coffee Organization. Also approved is a new national policy on plastic waste management, as well as a bill for the establishment of the Council for Traditional Alternative and Complementary Medicine Practice in Nigeria.
Now that Council has approved the ratification, some of the benefits that will come to the country would include allocation of coffee development projects. We'll have access to finance for our farmers, and all these things we feel are things that will assist to improve the yield of coffee in Nigeria.
And on the 21st of October 2020, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC) confirmed 37 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria. Till date, 61,667 cases have so far been confirmed, 56,880 cases discharged, and 1,125 deaths recorded. States on the daily chart include the FCT with 8 cases, Lagos 7, Taraba 5, Rivers 5, Adamawa 4, Kaduna 3, Anambra and Oshun have 2 cases, while Ogun has 1. All right, and that's the morning news. The program continues with Jume and Kingsley after this break. Stay with us.
The recent genuine concerns and agitations by Nigerians about the excessive use of force and, in some cases, extrajudicial killings and wrongful conduct by men of the Nigerian police force. The disbanding of SARS is only the first step in our commitment to extensive police reform in order to ensure that the primary duty of the police and other law enforcement agencies remains the protection of lives and livelihoods of our people. We will also ensure that all those responsible for misconduct or wrongful acts are brought to justice. We also deeply regret the loss of life of the young man in Oyo State during the recent demonstrations. I have directed that the circumstances of his death should be thoroughly investigated. Meanwhile, it is important to recognize that the vast majority of men and women of the police force are hardworking and diligent in performing their duties. The few bad eggs should not be allowed to tarnish the image and reputation of the force.
Time now to take some business stories with Comfort Amudu.
State governments have been leveraging on various windows to harness benefits in stimulus packages like the MSME Survival Fund to stimulate the economy at both the state and local government levels amid the coronavirus pandemic. These include taking advantage of the 560 billion naira and 462 billion naira made available by the federal government for MSMEs and agriculture sectors to mitigate the effect of COVID-19. The latest financial intervention that the subnationals are strategizing to leverage on is the $750 million loan by the World Bank to help Nigeria exit the lingering shocks of the pandemic on the nation's economy.
In terms of infrastructural gap, Nigeria is expected to be spending about 25 billion annually for 10 years to cover the gap. So, even though we have about 2.4 trillion for such projects, World Bank coming on board is to introduce best practice.
And what this program would do is to ensure that every quagmire that every Nigerian state is facing now because of the health challenge will be taken care of through this program. We are following a set guidelines set up by World Bank to ensure that we meet the eligibility criteria for all disbursement-linked indicators.
With Business News, Comfort Amudu.
Thank you very much, Comfort Amudu, for the business package. Next is Newspaper Review.
And our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Toby, is in the studio. Bayo, good morning.
Good morning, Jume. Good morning, Kinsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Bayo, good to see you.
Thank you.
We have just the Daily Trust newspaper this morning that came in, and the bold headlines there: a Black Tuesday for Nigeria, NSAS, anarchy in Lagos, with Rider, The Nation, TVC, MPA, state facilities burnt. Oba's Palace looted, High Court, bus terminal vandalized. Sultan Ayokunle Abdusalami, world leaders urge President Buhari to act. And then you see the disturbing picture story there. And Lagos State Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu visits injured NSAS victims of the Lekki mayhem at a hospital in Lagos yesterday. Also, the Nation building, like I read, area, Television Continental Headquarters and Makinde Police Station in Lagos are in flames after they were attacked by suspected hoodlums. At the bottom plate of the Daily Trust newspaper, 25 million PDP Nigerians. Appeal Court acquits ex-Kano Governor Shekaro. You find details on page 8. INEC moves postponement of 15 by-elections. You see the details on page 34. How Survival Fund can sustain MSMEs, save 1.8 million jobs. Details on page 20. Bayo, yesterday was a Black Tuesday for Nigeria.
Yes, indeed. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu yesterday, in his broadcast, asked the state to shut down for 72 hours. He has also asked flags to fly at half-staff as a matter of respect to the victims of the peaceful protests hijacked by hoodlums. The governor, in an address, he said he went round and visited the hospitals and the mortuaries to get first-hand information. And he reported that victims of Tuesday night shooting, he found at the General Hospital there were 10 injured, Reading Hospital there were 8, and the third hospital has 6. In all, he reported that there were 24 persons that were injured. And he said, thanks to Providence, there was no fatality. However, he later on corrected this by saying that there was one fatality, one person died from a head trauma from an isolated incident. There were violence in Lagos yesterday. 30 BRTV buses that is servicing the public in Lagos were set ablaze at Oyibo. 3 banks were looted. Television Continental, Lagos State Television, as well as the Nation newspaper had been set ablaze. The palace of the Oba of Lagos was invaded and his staff of office was stolen. As many as 20 police stations were burned within the Lagos metropolis. The home of the mother of Governor Sanwo-Olu was also touched in Surulere. The NPA building was also a victim. Across the nation, there were violence reported in Ebonyi, in Kano, Edo, Ondo, and Enugu. Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo said the losses in the hijacked nationwide protests were irreparable. He tweeted that he spoke to some of the injured victims and communicated with the ordinary citizens and policemen who got attacked across the state of the Federation. And he declared, I stand with all those affected in Lagos and all the states of the Federation in these trying times. The Senate President, Ahmed Lawan, has solicited support of all Nigerian leaders, including religious, political, and ethnic, to join and government in putting an end to the NSAS protests by youth. He says he appealed while having a meeting with the Inspector General of Police and the Director General of the Department of Service. He says every legitimate protest of the and legitimate demands of the NSAS protesters turned violent by those who hijacked the protests. And he says that our appeal is that it's time for all leaders to join government in bringing an end to this hijacked protest, for governments to address the issues raised. Since the advent of the Black Lives Matters in the world leaders have always been concerned about police brutalities. Accordingly, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, says that I condemn the escalation of violence in Lagos, which has resulted in multiple deaths and injuries. He called for the demonstrations to be peaceful and for an end to the reported police brutality and abuses. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has also urged Nigerian authorities to take urgent, decisive steps to deal with the violence by security forces and bring those guilty of crime to justice. Prominent Nigerians have also made appeal. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo urged President to act fast before it was too late. He says that he appealed for calm and said soldiers should be withdrawn and there should be an engagement for dialogue to bring an end to it. Professor Olusegun Yuka has called on governors in the states to say that instead of declaring curfew, they should convoke what he described as a meeting, what he described as community self-policing, which will operate at local council levels. This will curb hooliganism and extortionists who are trying to break the law and order across the country. The People's Democratic Party and the APC, of course, you trust politicians, they always play politics with any issues. PDP alleges that there's complicity of APC in attacks on protesters, that is from Kola Olagbodia. The APC says that the PDP leaders are playing politics and sponsoring ENSAL protesters for the political gains, that is from Yakini Nabena. However, Nigeria Labour Congress has advised a withdrawal of troops from the place and there should be drastic measures to engage and provide succor for those who are affected, and above all, to engage on the demands of the protesters. Meanwhile, there have been fallout from the protests that the Nigeria Examination Council, NECO, has now put on hold its papers that were supposed to have been written Thursday, today 22nd, tomorrow Friday 23rd, and Saturday. They have now been scheduled for between 17th and 19th of November. This is because examiners and vigilators are obstructed from getting across to the examination center. Across the nation, about 17 nations have so far declared one curfew or the other to stem the violence.
I think it's a good move, actually, because yesterday, waking up to what happened yesterday was just heartbreaking. You know, from Monday night to Tuesday morning, throughout the day yesterday, it was a gory sight of, unexplainable, reasons why these things happen. This is Nigeria. Protests can be peaceful.
Yes.
When it's overtaken like that, it doesn't, portray our country in a good light, actually.
Protests are constitutional rights of citizens. Protests also have their own modus operandi. I recall, for instance, during the inauguration of President Donald Trump, persons said they wanted to demonstrate, and the procedure is if you want to demonstrate, you notify, not take permission, you notify the police and give a picture of the route you are going to follow. They indicated that they were going to go by Pennsylvania Avenue, which was the venue for the inauguration. Exactly. The police said, sorry, we can't accept that. You can take other places, but no, for the purposes of security. Now, if we adopt that kind of process, you will be able to have police escort those who are protesting peacefully, and they'll be able to carry out their protests peacefully. But the irony in this time is that the protest is about the police themselves. So the protesters will not trust the police, and the police too will not feel comfortable to provide protection for the protesters. So that is the dilemma. And the consequence of what we had now is hoodlums hijacking it. So it's very sad. But the positive development on running story is that 163 of the 1,993 inmates, jailbreakers in Benin, from Sapele Road Prison and Oku, have now been recaptured. So there's still initiative to look for the rest of them.
For the rest of them.
Well, I think that the issue, of course, has long since gone past whether the protesters requested for police security or police protection. What triggered the subsequent events from Tuesday night right up onto the yesterday was certainly a mishandling of the situation. There's no question about it. I think there have been opinions expressed on that, including that by the Lagos State Governor, who himself, has now become a victim, as it were, because his mother's house was also razed. The same with the mob action is that a mob is irrational. A mob is irrational. If you look at the various locations that were vandalized or attacked yesterday, you'll be asking yourself, just what were they looking for? In Boshire Magistrate Court, you saw there were videos showing the hoodlums cutting away photocopiers, chairs, all kinds of things. The palace of the Oba of Lagos was also hit, and they were just cutting away items. The Oba of Lagos, according to one account, had to be spirited to safety by a detachment of soldiers. And there are several other buildings. I mean, 2 media houses were affected, TVC.
MPA.
And the TVC, of course, and then the Nation newspaper at different parts of town. And then the Nigerian Post Authority headquarters building on Marina. Yes. So you just ask yourself what exactly was playing out. Of course, it was mob action triggered, they would say, by the unsavory events of Tuesday night when the unarmed protesters had a rain of bullets on them. And 2 of our correspondents, NTA correspondents, were at that particular location, and they had their own reports. So it's most unfortunate that these things have happened, and of course that's part of what we're going to be discussing this morning, the way forward. We focused on this subject matter the whole of this week, and sometime last week we also took on it, and then we'll see what happens. Let's take a look at the editorial this morning. The editorial is coming from Daily Trust newspaper. Okay. So at page 16. It says, Police Reform Act and Avoidable Controversy. It says that the newly launched Police Reform Act, PRA, made its entry in a most undignified manner as it came in the midst of circumstances that hardly edified it. It said that the Court of Appeal declared it null and void for containing toxic provisions that breached the Constitution, in particular, usurpation of the powers and responsibilities of the Police Service Commission with regard to the appointment, promotion, and discipline of police officers below the rank of Inspector General of Police. The editorial, of course, goes on to say that in the light of the gravity of this slip, there are questions over the remediation measures that should be considered and implemented to avert such a situation in the future, whereby valuable legislative time and resources can be deployed by less than diligent officials to inject questionable and self-defeating provisions into legislation, with the PRA as a valid metaphor. Now that the PRA may return to the National Assembly for a retouch in line with making it consistent with the provisions of the Constitution, it is not too much for Nigerians to expect a better package from the legislature than the earlier outing which made it ineligible. Just one point to just start before you make a comment. It says Police Reform Act. The short title is actually the Police Act 2020. I'm not familiar with the Police Reform Act, but
yes, they are referring to the Police Act 2020.
Yes,
the kernel,
short title is Police Act 2020.
Yes, the kernel of that editorial is that why would the National Assembly pass a bill and send it to the executive for an assent when it contains clauses that violate the Constitution? Mm-hmm. And it was based on that the Court of Appeal said it is null and void, so long as it is inconsistent with the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Our lawmakers should have made this. And so what the editorial is saying that the law should be returned to the National Assembly and care should be taken to make sure that they dot the I's and cross the T's so that it doesn't become a law that is in conflict with our ground norm. Incidentally, it is coming at a time where the police force itself is facing a challenge. Already, the Office of the Inspector General of Police, that is the Police High Command, and the Police Service Commission are in court. And the case is now at the Supreme Court, is sub judice, so therefore we will not want to talk about the incidents or the issues that are involved. But it goes to show that all is not well within the police service. You recall that when a Minister of Police Affairs was also appointed, we had cause to remark on this Good Morning Nigeria that the police was now having several authorities. The Police High Command and its management, the Police Service Commission, then there's the Police Council itself. Now you now have a Minister of Police Affairs. These levels of authority have become very challenging for one public institution, a very important public institution. And so there must be harmony in these responsibilities that is subdivided within these various levels of authority for the police force.
All right, the matter is not fully settled yet. As we have indicated, there's still being processed, depending on the approach of their lordships at the apex court. We'll see what becomes of the provisions that contra the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended. But as I said, we'll see how things go, Bayo. Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you too.
See you again tomorrow. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we're live on NTA's network service. We're taking a short break. Now, when we return, got ahead with our item for discussion. End SARS protests and then the way forward.
Demands of #EndSARS movement. Immediate release of all arrested protesters. Justice for all deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensation for their families. Setting up an independent body to oversee the investigation and prosecution of all reports of police misconduct within 10 days. In line with the new Police Act, psychological evaluation and retraining to be confirmed by an independent body of all disbanded SARS officers before they can be redeployed. Increase police salary so that they are adequately compensated for protecting the lives and property of citizens. Federal government's response. On 11th October 2020, the Inspector General of Police dissolved the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS, across the 36 states police commands and the Federal Capital Territory. On October 12th, President Muhammadu Buhari addressed the nation, stating, "The disbanding of SARS is only the first step in our commitment to extensive police reforms." On 13th October 2020, the Inspector General of Police ordered all defunct SARS personnel to report at Force Headquarters, Abuja, for debriefing as well as psychological and medical examination. On 13th October 2020, the Presidential Panel on the Reform of SARS accepted the 5-point demand of the #EndSARS protesters. On 15th October 2020, the National Economic Council, NEC, directed the immediate establishment of state-based judicial panels of inquiry across the country to receive and investigate complaints of police brutality, related extrajudicial killings with a view to delivering justice for all victims of the dissolved SARS and other police units. State governors should immediately establish state-based special security and human rights committees to be chaired by governors in their state, and to supervise the newly formed police tactical units and all other security agencies located in the state. This will ensure the protection of citizens' human rights. Members will also include representatives of youths and civil society, as well as head of police tactical units in each of the states.
If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria, and to begin our discussion on the subject matter, End SARS protest, the way forward, let's take the background as put together by Aisha Uba Ali.
The End SARS protest began quite peacefully, with the protesters, mostly youth, drawing attention to alleged brutality and extortion by SARS, a tactical unit of the Nigerian police force. What initially started with one demand for government to end SARS is now growing to include other agitations. Among their agitations are demands for the immediate release of all arrested protesters, justice for all deceased victims of the protest, as well as compensation for their families. They also insist on the setting up of an independent body to compile and investigate all reports of police misconduct, and also an increase in the salary of police officers so that they are adequately compensated for protecting the lives and property of Nigerians. They also ask that state governors should establish state-based special security and human rights committees to supervise the newly formed police tactical unit, as well as a victim support fund to compensate deserving victims, among others. While the demands of the protesters have largely been met by the federal and state governments, the protests have continued unabated. However, the protest has taken another dimension, with various state governments imposing curfew to curtail violence witnessed in some parts of the country. On Tuesday, violence erupted in the Lekki axis of Lagos, leading to the burning down of public and private buildings as well as other infrastructure. What then is the way forward? How can Nigeria move beyond the violence witnessed in parts of the country? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria will give answers to these issues.
All right, thank you, Aisha Obale, for that backgrounder. We have guests now to begin discussing this. Our regular analyst, Dr. Benson Olugbo, is Executive Director, Clean Foundation. Dr. Olugbo, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Thank you, and good morning, Nigeria.
And joining us from our Jos Network Center, that's the capital of Plateau State, is the Honorable Commissioner for Information Plateau, Dan Manjang. Mr. Dan Manjang, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Viewers, it's a pleasure to also be on this program.
All right, let's get from you what the situation has been this week in Plateau, particularly with regard to the protests and counter-protests. We know that your state has also set up a judicial panel of inquiry into the now disbanded SARS. But how much tension has Plateau witnessed on account of the protests against SARS and indeed agitation for speeded up police reforms?
As far as Plateau State is concerned, the protest has been has stayed in Jos, the capital city of the state, and then parts of Bukuru in Jos South local government. It had remained in these two local governments, Jos South and Jos North. And so we were able to contain the situation because His Excellency, the Right Honorable Simon Bakolalong, the executive governor of the state, had to act proactively after convene a security meeting. And the security meeting, when they rose, one of the resolutions was to impose a curfew on Jos South and Jos North local government. And that has helped. The areas that got burned is Amadou Bello Way. For people that know Jos, there are the buildings that were destroyed in Amadou Bello Way, part of Ola Hospital. It's not the hospital, but that area, and in Gero Road, in Bukuru, Jos South local government, and part of Kugia, a church was burnt in Gero Road and a mosque was burned in Kugia area. But as I talk this moment, there are far-reaching measures that have been taken. Maybe we'll go for that later. But so far, the situation is calm. The curfew has helped, and well-meaning individuals on the plateau have applauded the measures that were taken, the proactive measures that were taken by the state governor and by the state. And people are realizing that there's nothing that you can achieve with violence what you cannot achieve with peace. And we are doing community engagement, leadership engagement, religious leaders engagement. We are engaging with traditional rulers also. Yesterday that engagement was done. But so far the situation on the plateau has not escalated to other local governments where there are flashpoints. So it's because of the proactive measures, and the local government management committees have been put on, management committee chairmen have been put on red alert to make sure that they engage the security, engage the communities in dialogue the way the state government has done. Let them engage the communities in dialogue. By so doing, we'll be able to contain what had happened, and then we'll be able to count our losses, and that's the position that we are now. So far, Jos has been very calm. There's no, and you know, the trade fair has been on, but it was caught up in the web of this situation, and that we have found ourselves in. Very, very unfortunate that has taken us some steps backward.
Dan Majan, Commissioner for Information, Plateau State, thank you. We'll return to you as the program progresses. Let's now come back to the studio where the Executive Director, Clean Foundation, Dr. Benson Ologwo, is here. Let's get your view on what has happened from Monday to today in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. It's actually humbling and sobering that young Nigerians, youths, are ready to die just to live. And I think the primary responsibility of every government is to protect life and property. When you now have to fight for that protection and you die for it, that is the greatest sacrifice you can make for any nation. And then from the pictures we are seeing, they were carrying the national flag and singing the national anthem, just to remind us that there is need to fight for this country. So for me, it's a humbling experience, and it also calls for soul searching, you know, for those of us who are alive, in terms of what do we do and what can we do to improve the conditions of living for Nigerians. Because I guess the whole essence of this NSAS movement is for the soul of Nigeria. And I don't think there's any young man who will really want to go and die if there is something on the table for that person. So I've thought over it, I've been thinking over it, and that is why I said, let me come here and also add my voice. And I don't think the requests or the 5/5 or the issue of the protest is something government cannot do. It is well within the purview of the government. The government has instrument of power. Government has the resources, really, to support the agitations of the citizens. And both our constitution, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and other laws we have signed into, the economic and social rights, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, makes it important that life is sacred. And before you take life, there is a need for you to exhaust all remedies before you can take life. In fact, the Constitution also goes ahead to say that you're innocent until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. Besides that, the Nigerian Constitution also provides for the right to protest. Peaceful protest, the right to express yourself, is a protected right. So one of the key things we have to ask ourselves is what went wrong? Because obviously the protesters were relatively peaceful to the extent of our own investigations and understandings of what had happened. And I think they made their points very clear. We have seen the responses of the government, but the question is, those responses, are they really geared towards ending the problems that we've had? And I guess that's one of the key things we have to ask ourselves. So if you ask me, I think the infusion of rogue elements, undesirable elements into the struggle or into the protests has caused what we are seeing now. And it's really an unfortunate thing. And I think, I believe strongly, and we believe as civil society organizations also, that there is need for the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and the President, who is the Chief Security Officer, to actually make out time to address Nigerians. Because this has gotten to a situation where, as the father of the nation, there is need for him to talk to Nigerians. Because he's the one who knows the direction which we should go now. He's the one who has the policy initiative for this government. And I think that is one. The second thing also is that with the reality on the moment, I think Operation, the current military.
Smile.
Yes.
6.
Yeah, I've forgotten the name.
Crocodile
The Operation
Smile.
Crocodile Smile. I think it should be
6,
suspended.
yes, 6.
I think there is need for it to be suspended.
Okay.
Because with the people we've seen in those videos, we are wearing military uniform. So it is their responsibility to tell us that those people we saw on those victors in Lekki on Tuesday night, that they are not military officers. And from my own assessment, with the people we saw there who opened fire on protesters who were carrying flags, and you could hear them singing the national anthem.
Somebody described them as sitting ducks.
Yeah.
They were just sitting there.
They were just sitting there. So that process of bringing the military to the state, I think it has to be suspended for now. And there is need for government to investigate what really happened. I've seen that the Nigerian Armed Forces has kind of countered the claims being made by civil society organizations, but there is need to go beyond countering the claims to really tell us or come out with a clear investigation that these are the people we are suspecting that did this thing. Because human beings did it. They were carrying live guns, and people have been able to even identify the kind of bullets that, the shells of the bullets that were on those places. So there's a lot of things. And besides, in terms of the legal framework of the panels of inquiries that have been set up by different states, that is a good move. And we support that. But there are issues that has to be dealt with. One of those issues is one. The last governing council of the National Human Rights Commission, their tenure ended in December 2015. 2015.
And they are still in office?
As we speak, there is no governing council for the National Human Rights Commission. We all know that the National Human Rights Commission has the responsibility to protect the rights and privileges of Nigerians. It's a government institution. And when the governing council is not there, the commission is restrained in its acting. In fact, the law actually states that it's actually the governing council that should constitute a panel of inquiry, suomotu. You understand what I'm trying to say? Of its own, as in relation to the provisions of that constitution, that the law that establishes the National Human Rights Commission. So if you push that argument further, then you ask yourself questions in terms of, I have looked at the law, and the National Economic Council recommended to state governments to set up panels of inquiry and then develop the terms of references. Beautiful. I think they're acting under the Tribunal of Inquiry Act. The question we have to ask is, the National Economic Council, do they have the power within Nigeria to demand for such establishment? Is it not supposed to be Federal Executive Council? Beyond that, where is the Police Service Commission? Because as we speak, it is the primary responsibility of the Police Service Commission to recruit, to discipline, and to promote police officers from the rank of inspector to that of the DIG. It's only the Inspector General of Police that is under the direct responsibility of the president. From the names of the people that are reeled out by different states, the Police Service Commissioner is not involved. So the question is, assuming the panels, 37 panels now from the way we've seen them, makes a recommendation that a police officer should be prosecuted, who has that responsibility? Is it the Commissioner of Police, Commissioner of Police, Attorney General of the state, or will they make those recommendations to the Police Service Commission, who will now have to sit? You understand the legal issues of some of the things I'm raising here? Now, so that means that there are still some legal issues that will have to be dealt with before you can say, finally, that victims, survivors, and their families will have closure. So when the panels submit their recommendations, probably to the state government, and then direct the Attorney General, would the Attorney General be able to prosecute? Because before you prosecute police officers in a civilian court, there has to be a procedure in terms of the Odarum trial, to remove them formally from the institution where they were, before now the Police Service Commission can recommend. So my thinking is that the Police Service Commission should have been part of whatever is happening, because the Constitution says they are responsible for punishment. So if we insulate them from whatever is happening, that means at the end of the day, we will still need to go back to that table where the Police Service Commission will need to sit and recommend dismissal, prosecution, or punishment. So I think these are some of the issues that we are looking at in terms of the legal framework, and we feel that a lot of things are still not clear. And
all right, Dr. Olubo, thank you very much. The points you have raised are germane to our conversation, to say that, all right, the judicial panels of inquiry are already been set up by some states. I think about 17 of those states have set them up. Plateau is one of them, Lagos, Edo, and I think a number of other states. Rivers is there. Katsina is also there. Those things. But I think it is immaterial whether the recommendation came from the National Economic Council or from the Federal Executive Council. It's a recommendation, and the states have now exercised their own authority under their Tribunal of Inquiry's laws to set all of this up. But the issue relating to what you then do with the recommendations, that's to say with the outcome, is significant. The PSC on its own, some persons would argue, cannot have a tribunal of inquiry. It can only discipline those persons it has jurisdiction over, namely police officers. So if this one, the scope from what you have seen from the terms of reference is much broader. It covers a broad range of persons who are either victims or who are relatives of victims or survivors of victims, and so on and so forth. So the scope is more elaborate. I would expect that when the government issues its white paper, the respective state governments, they will give indications as to what the next steps would be, including, for instance, recommending number of officers to be disciplined to the PSC, and if those persons then get dismissed, the AG of the state will take it up for criminal prosecution where the need arises. All right, but I know that we'll come back to that, unless you want to just quickly chip in something.
So what I want to say is that there are actually low-hanging fruits that would have, shown government's commitment to reform. Why am I saying that? You have the Eju Presidential Committee on Police Reform 2005. You have the Madami Commission. You have the MD Yusuf Presidential Panel on Police Reform. You have the Pari Osayende Presidential Panel on Police Reform. You have the Justice Uwais Panel on Electoral Reform. And of course, we know that part of that was also the use of security agencies during elections. So they made a lot of recommendations. Finally, the National Human Rights Commission was also commissioned in 2018, and they presented their report to the president in 2019. A panel was set up to develop a white paper, and that is the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, the Inspector General of Police, and the Attorney General represented by the Solicitor General. This happened last year. Till now, the white paper is not yet out. So if government was actually genuine in terms of dealing with these issues, what we expect is that recommendation should have been the first something to be dealt with, because that Ojoku panel of 2019 was quite comprehensive. In fact, they recommended for the scrapping of FSAS, Federal SARS. If you remember, there was a time there was this issue and they changed
some of those things. Some of the actions that we have seen lately derive from those recommendations, because a lot of reference had been made to the 2018 panel, the presidential panel that was set up, and why action had not been taken on the recommendations of those particular panels. Benson, as I said, we'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's return to Plateau State Capital Jos. Dan Manjang, the Commissioner for Information of Plateau. I was just wondering, again, just trying to have a clearer understanding of what went on in Plateau, and therefore the likely impact of the raft of measures that your state government has taken. We saw, let's use this week as an example, say Edo State or Lagos State, for instance. Things got out of hand in Lagos on Tuesday following the night assault on the protesters at the Admiralty Toll Plaza in Lekki. and thereafter all hell broke loose, and yesterday you could see the mayhem, the arson and the looting that went on. Earlier you were talking about some of the buildings that were touched in parts of Plateau, mostly in Jos. What accounted for the arson? Because in parts of Lagos, as Benson Lugbo has said, it was the infusion, allegedly, of rogue elements, so-called protesters, as we also saw in Abuja here, that triggered the mayhem. What happened in Plateau?
Yes, as a matter of fact, what happened in Plateau, we have been able to assess it, and in reviewing it, it is clearly an infiltration by hoodlums, by people who do not mean well for Plateau State. But at the same time, you cannot isolate it from the fact that people were not ready to listen to constituted authority. There was a build-up for this protest. It went on and on despite the appeals by government and well-spirited individuals on the state, in the state. And so people infiltrated, and if you look at the way and manner this infiltration came, it came in pockets of areas that have been volatile, that are flash points of crisis anytime we have a crisis in these areas. And so there's a tendency for government to think that it is because of the NSAS protesters, because all sorts of they initially said they did not have a leadership, but a leadership emerged. And prominent Nigerians that we know, unfortunately, became became the arrowheads of those. It became a political matter because there was politics in it. We saw elements of politicization of the demonstration. We saw elements of religious components that are coming in because on Sunday there are religious leaders that actually accompanied the protesters and organized a prayer session for them and took a walk along with them. And so this triggered the other elements that wanted to loot people's property. You know, there are miscreants that are already sitting to take advantage of the situation. We expected that after the measures that government took, these protesters will listen and hearken to the voice of reason and look at dispassionately what government has been able to do. But they chose the path of silence. And as I talk to you right now, despite the fact that the curfew is in place, we read on social media these NSAS protesters still saying that we as a government are wasting our time, that after the curfew they are going to regroup. These are the kinds of things that are so worrisome that you don't take the interests of the state at heart. You know, I have always said that until you are alive, before you can fight of what benefit are we going to have by burning the entire state. So, in a nutshell, what actually happened is that there were people that took advantage of it. And because of our assessment of the personalities that accompanied the protesters, they brought in religion into it, and you know, religion is a commodity in Plateau State that can be very, very volatile, that is very, very sensitive. They brought in politics into it because we have isolated and profiled those people that gathered. We have profiled them. We have seen that there are elements of politics in it, and above all, there are people that completely, by nature, they have not seen anything good in what we are doing on the plateau, in what any leader is doing. I have said it in other panels, that other balances, that people do not appreciate leadership. They only appreciate leadership when the leadership is not there. They are saying after NSAS, the demands rose to up to about 10. Now they are even saying end Buhari. Some are calling for the head of the state governor, despite the issues that he has done. They tried to block the governor. They tried to make the governor address them, but we said that the governor, until you provide the enabling environment, because the governor of Plateau State had been stoned twice, even when he went to an IDP camp to also to help with their situation, to assess the situation. And when this thing came, the way it organized, they would claim that it was peaceful, but it was not peaceful. The aim, it was not there. The security reports that we had as a state government did not warrant us to open the governor to that kind of ridicule, to that kind of danger. And I can assure you that on Monday this week, for people that would really want to believe what I'm saying, on Monday this week, when the trade fair that is ongoing on Plateau State, in Plateau State was to be declared open, many people, they blocked the ways where the governor was going to declare the trade fair open at Polo Ground, and kept people hostage for 5 hours. Some of my colleagues, commissioners that were there, had to disguise and even climb motorcycles and abandon their cars there. If you are calling this a peaceful protest, why are you saying that? Why are you saying that you want to continue even after that? Why are you looking for people's properties to destroy? Yes, we would say it is NSAS protesters that did that, because there's no evidence to show that it is not them, because they introduce religion into it and introduce politics into it.
Majan, Commissioner for Information, Jos, you said SARS protesters did all the destruction, and you also said they've been infiltrated by rogue elements that came in, and sort of joined the protest. And we heard that Plateau State Governor Simon Lalong has established a panel of inquiry to look into these issues. Let's now bring in Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst, is joining us via Zoom. Jide Ojo, I've been following you for the past few days on this NSAS saga, and I've been reading up on what you've been writing. Let's get your view on your take on what happened, on Tuesday night, and which culminated into destruction that took place in Lagos and other parts of the country yesterday.
Good morning, Nigerians, and thanks for the opportunity to be on this platform this morning. What happened this week, Monday stroke Tuesday, has been a national calamity of gargantuan proportion. It's very saddening, and I will still blame our government for not doing sufficient, security threat assessment. Because if they did, and they should have been able to proactively nip the situation in the bud. I mean, we knew the looting and the miscreants and the hoodlums are going to take advantage of what was going to happen. And experience serves us. If you read my column in the Punch yesterday, which where I compare what currently is going on to what happened during the June 12, 1993 election saga, you will know that we have experience behind us, and our intelligence community, over 20 security agencies in this country, if they have worked collaboratively, they will have been able to separate the wheat from the wheat from the chaff. I mean, look at the one in Lagos. Why do you need to deploy military to even scare? Let's even assuming without conceding that there was no life lost. I don't believe there was no life lost. But assuming without conceding that the military just shot into the air to scare the protester. Why do you do that? Cutting off the CCTV, cutting off the light supply to that area, even for stampede, there will likely be a casualty. There will likely be some casualties. You have blackened the entire space. Now you start shooting. People are going to be scared. People, look at what happened in 2001 when there was bomb blast, the detonation of expired bomb at Ikeja Cantonment. I was living in Lagos at that point in time. And that happened during broad daylight. People were just hearing boom, boom. They were hearing the gunshot and the booming of bombs. And they started running. Many of them ran into Lagoon. Many of them ran into, what's it called? Not Lagoon. They ran into, I've forgotten, Canal. They ran into Canal, and that's how many of them died. It wasn't that there was any shootout. It was just expired bomb. So why would you cut off light? Why would you remove this innocent protesters? Meanwhile, on the mainland, these looters, these miscreants were having a field day. Those are the people the military should have been deployed to go and stop, not the peaceful protesters who are sitting, singing national anthem, carrying a national flag of their country. So it is condemnable. The government must take responsibility for this. I don't know whether it's the president or ordered the deployment of the military. I don't know whether it's the chief of defense staff. I don't want to know whether it's national security advisor. Somebody must take responsibility for that. What happened in Lekki was unpardonable, was inexcusable. And that is what it is. And I said on Tuesday live on this station, look, whether it's true or false, there are ample evidences that, either government contractors or people who are linked to state power actually, offered some protection to some of these people we call infiltrators. There are footages, there are clips, there are videos circulating, and I don't know whether they want to. I know the DSS came out yesterday to debunk that his men were involved in the sponsoring of anti-NSAS, in the attack on the anti-NSAS protesters in some states like in Abuja. But the point is that we saw SUVs, we saw people, miscreants wielding cudgels who are entering SUVs.
All right. Oh.
Yes, we seem to have lost Jide Ojo there. And Kisley.
Yeah, Jide, the signal was just coming on off and on. Jide Ojo, we'll return to you later on in the course of the conversation. Some very useful points that you made there. If you are listening, I recall the Ikeja bomb explosions vividly. It was Sunday, January 27th, 2002. A terrible day for residents in Lagos, and the canal into which hundreds of persons got drowned was known as the Okeafa Canal, just behind the Isolo there. All right, now we have two other guests who will be part of this conversation. You saw him on the screen a while ago. One of them, that's the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Tony Ojoku. Pleasure to have you with us, and good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you.
Now, also joining us this morning is Professor Oshita. He used to be Director General, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, based here in Abuja. He is now Executive Director of Ubuntu Center for Africa, Peace Building and Development. Professor Oshita is joining us via Zoom. Professor Oshita, your frame is very small. Makes you look like a small man, but I know that you have a big brain and you're a big man indeed. Professor Oshita, just tell us what, I mean, we keep having this appearance and disappearance. Just give us your impression of what has been happening. The nation is obviously in crisis on account of the NSAS protests and the counter-protests, and then the mayhem that got unleashed on Tuesday, followed, of course, by the arson and looting by miscreants in parts of Benin, that's the Edo capital, but mostly now in Lagos and elsewhere in the country. What are you seeing?
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigerians. It has been a very, very difficult period for me, sitting back and watching, what has unfolded. For me, as a peace practitioner, what has disturbed me the most has been the seeming inability of all of us to capture the scenarios that were ahead of us even before they unfolded. At Ubuntu Center, we had different scenarios, and for each scenario that we captured from what was likely to unfold, we also had what we thought would be remedial measures. First of all, we need to map out, the actors in the conflict. Yes, we had the NSAS. We should also have known that hoodlums would be available because we are in a society where we already have challenges. So in distant parts of this country, hoodlums are indeed practically without also, we needed to have imagined that they would come out because in our history, this is, of course, we have the security agencies. What has bothered me the most is the fact that in spite of these predictable things, our own plans, to deal with this protest situation did not indicate that we did a proper mapping of the scenarios that were likely to unfold. As a practitioner, this bothered
Oh, shame. We understand the signal there is gone. Professor Oshita, I just hope we're able to get back to you so that you give us the benefit of your insights into what's playing out. But I earlier introduced Tony Ojoku. Is Oshita back? I'm going to find out from our director. Is it stable? If it's stable, all right. Professor Oshita, we lost you a while ago. Just continue from where you thought we lost you.
Well, I didn't know you lost me, but I was talking about, a situation like this, we ought to be able to create all the scenarios that are likely, to emerge in the context of the NSAS, protest. And as I was saying, I said we were able to map out the hoodlums. Yes, you imagine that there will be hoodlums because even in a, normal, situation, we have hoodlums. We have hoodlums, all over the place. I like to go to places where hoodlums control spaces within our country. So I know that hoodlums will be there. Protesters are there. The anti-protesters, the security agencies, the government, and people who assign themselves jobs. And when I hear people keep saying they politicize, the issues themselves are within the domain of politics. I'm sure what they want to say is they became partisan. Being political is different from being partisan. So these issues are political issues, because they have bearing on day-to-day running of our affairs. So when people say they became political, they were brought in politics, it doesn't make sense to me. What they want to say is that people became partisan. That is, they became, associating with political parties and their own interests. On a normal day, all the things that have happened, very things that provoke the answers are within the political domain. So you cannot stay outside the political domain to deal with these issues. So I feel that we should be able to, and then always build our scenarios so that we know that there are many things that were predictable in all that has unfolded. All that have unfolded, we had things that were predictable if we were, doing scenario building. And then when we build the scenarios, we will know that if it goes this way, this is how we will deal with it in order not to get into further mess. But as I see, we have waited and everything that would be bad has continued to unfold without proper antidotes, based on our own planning. So that worries me a lot. And I think that even as we go on, moving forward, I think we can track this, where it is now and see so that we can do damage, repair as we move forward. Because for me, I'm still very worried with the kinds of things that I see and hear around. So I believe that we can redeem what we have taken ourselves into by taking certain precautions. We can still,
Professor Oshita, that's to my assumption that. All right, Professor Oshita, I mean, your points are noted, and we'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in now Tony Ojoku, Executive Secretary, National Human Rights Commission. Mr. Ojoku, well, you have a lot on your plate, and the number of issues as to what should have been done before the protests to end SARS even took off. And now that we have had a protest, and now that the protests got hijacked at some points, and hoodlums have stolen the headlines, and we have fatalities all around the place, there are a number of issues on your table. You just begin to take them one after the other, and let's hear your views.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kingsley. It's a good opportunity to let Nigerians know what the Commission has been doing. Of course, as has been pointed out earlier, we foresaw this over the years because the issue of police brutality in this country is well known to everybody. As far back as 2006, 2008, the Commission partnered with NOPRIN then to carry out public hearings on police brutality. We went around this country, we flagged these issues, we took this out in our reports. As far as recent as 2017, the Commission also partnered with Clean Foundation. We went on this country, investigating SARS, talking about the atrocities being committed by SARS. And just around the same time, the End SARS movement was gaining momentum. And you recall the Vice President had to step in and said, look, we must have a comprehensive investigation of SARS. And that led to the Presidential Panel on Investigation of SARS, which I was the chairperson. And we finished that exercise. We went to as many states as complained, about 13 states. We had complaints from about 13 states. We went around. We visited the SARS facilities. And of course, also there was the issue that some of the complaints were not even against SARS, but some other tactical units. But because of the notoriety of SARS, every bad thing was targeted at SARS. So that report, of course, made fundamental recommendations, which included the disbandment of SARS, the reform of the Nigerian Police Act, which has been done, and of course, issues about training, retraining, dismissal of some officers, prosecution of some officers. Under the Constitution, if your rights are violated, you're entitled to apology. This apology has to be made. Of course, in some cases, there were issues of court orders, which police had refused to obey. So we outlined all this, and we recommended, you remember the controversial state police and local government police, which was the only thing really the government did not agree with, but they had agreed with all the other recommendations. And when we submitted that report on the 3rd of June, 2019 to the federal government, government accepted the report and said, okay, let the three-man panel, work out the modalities for implementation. We did that between the Commission, the Inspector General of Police, and the Solicitor General of the Federation representing the Attorney General then. And we submitted that report in November 2019. And of course, the process of white paper, government has to look at it, and eventually, just as this issue was breaking out, government had accepted the white paper, and it was due for implementation. So when this thing started, we quickly convened a stakeholders forum that looked at the 5 issues that was raised by the End SARS movement. And we advised government that these are acceptable, these are doable, these are already
issues that are in the report, and these were all accepted, and this was conveyed. This was made known to the End SARS movement. So, but as soon as that was made, then the demands started increasing, and that was where the problem started. But then, for us, what we had to do, because there was the issue of trust already, saying there have been previous reports, there have been previous panels, but nothing gets done. So to assure them that, look, we are serious about the recommendations. The SARS was, of course, banned. Then the issue of Police Act has already been signed. Then the issue of people who were arrested and all that were released. Now, we also broke down one by one the officers who were supposed to be dismissed, those who were supposed to be prosecuted, those who were supposed to pay compensation. We broke these things down. The one for dismissal and order, we took the Police Service Commission and the Inspector General of Police, and they have swung into action on it. The one for prosecution, we took the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, and he has swung into action on it. We are also breaking some of these prosecutions down to the states, because the prosecution, some of them will be done in the states where they happened. So this has been also sent to the various states. So the Ministry of Justice of all the affected states are working on the prosecution documents for those who are going to be prosecuted. The Police Service Commission and the Inspector General of Police are working on, because by their procedure, after this recommendation for dismissal, for instance, you have to issue them a query, and then the other processes follow, because they're also entitled to go to court to fight for their rights. That's their entitlement under the Constitution. And that's why we're saying these things are processes. They're not events that you do today, everything ends today. It's a process. Now, the Stakeholders Forum, of course, which Clean Foundation has been identified as one of the key role players. We have 5 committees. These 5 committees are looking at the entire recommendations in the white paper. Those dealing with recruitment, appointment, those dealing with infrastructure for the police, those dealing with the standard operating procedures, all aspects of the recommendation. These are processes that are being looked into, and these are signs of good faith. Yes, there have been disappointments in the past, but we're saying there's nobody in this country today that does not know that Nigeria will never be the same again in the way we do things. Any public official now that deceives himself to think he will continue the way he used to do things before is making a big mistake. So for us, this is a watershed, and let us give peace a chance. For us at the Commission, we are made up our mind to continue our efforts in defending the rights of the people. Yesterday, on Tuesday evening, was one of the saddest days of my life in this work, when I watched how, peaceful protesters were shot at with live bullets. It was so horrendous. I think I needed some psychological treatment.
Everybody did.
The trauma was too much for everybody in this country. And we've condemned that in no unmincing words. And nothing short of holding those officers accountable will satisfy us in this country. The government has to do it. Now everybody is denying, and that is the most annoying part of it. Are they telling us that those people were not soldiers? If they were not soldiers, we must get forensics in this country to analyze who they are. If they were individuals in military uniform, we need to get them out. That's the only thing that will satisfy Nigerians.
I saw a video yesterday with, is it name tags of military officers that were being displayed on the social media.
Exactly.
And some even had names.
Exactly.
Can they be traced?
They can be traced. I think the forensics should be able to analyze and get to the root of the matter. Because even officers who have made announcements with marks were decoded. So there are forensics that can be used to deal with these things. We are not going to sweep this under the carpet. I'm happy that the government of Lagos State has set up a panel of inquiry already. But the army must come out and do something critical to identify these people. Those people must be identified and made to account. That's the only way Nigerians will be satisfied about this. So we as a sign of good faith also, we have instituted the panels, and I think it is good to deal with this issue of panels and how they will align and result into one common report for government. Now, all the panels in all the states have membership of the National Human Rights Commission. That is the structure. Now, the idea is, when all these panels finish sitting, the national panel, which is set up by the National Human Rights Commission at the center, will collate all these reports and submit to the federal government. Don't forget that the police, which is the target, is a federal institution. So, yes, the prosecutions that may be done at the state level, but if you are going to discipline officers, it has to be done by the Police Service Commission. So, this report will be collated by the panel, which has been set up by the National Human Rights Commission, and one report will be submitted to the federal government. But this can be dealt with at different levels because we're in one country. So those that will be implemented by the Police Service Commission will be submitted to Police Service Commission because it will be a white paper of government. And Police Service Commission will take the procedures they ought to take to implement it. The states will prosecute those that ought to be prosecuted by the state attorney general, the one in the federal capital territory, the federal government will do, and so on and so forth. So it's one country. It is one report that will be submitted to the federal government at every time. But there is the need now that action must go on in all the 36 states, because if you leave one panel in Abuja here, that means if we go to Ogun State today, the people in all the rest of the country will be waiting for their turn. Then tomorrow you go to Kwara State. Those in Borno State will be waiting. The other day you go to, so, I mean, with the existence of the situation
how many
now.
states do we have now? I mean, the last figure was 17, I counted.
I think
Yes.
it's 37 now. I think almost all the states
17,
have
because
17.
one of the reports I read probably yesterday also talked about casino.
Yeah.
But some states say haven't.
Yes,
decided
but
what-
there's a clear directive now.
What you are saying now is that all states should have.
Yes, all states should have, and there's been clear directives on that as at yesterday, that all states must establish these panels of inquiry to deal with this complaint, because Nigerians want to see action. There's no need for you to start waiting for your turn in the next 2 or 3 weeks, because people lose conscience. And that's why people are saying that they don't trust that these things put up in place will actually give any remedy. But if action is good, like Lagos State now has set up their own, anybody who takes his complaint to that panel in Lagos will be heard. Like these issues that happened at Lekki yesterday, a lot of issues will arise from it. And to assist members of the public, the National Human Rights Commission is partnering with Nigerian Bar Association. Nigerian Bar Association has branches in even almost all the local governments in Nigeria. So what the partnership with the NBA is to help people articulate their complaints, their petitions. And if also possible, help them to present these petitions before the various panels in all the states. You can agree with me that the idea of going on in all the states is a wonderful idea, because with the situation of things in Nigeria today, that is the only way to bring down the tension. And it will be very unfortunate if people don't see this, because it is a matter of an emergency and the government is rising up to it in collaboration with the commission. So we are fine by it. It will be well coordinated. The National Human Rights Commission will be setting the standards so that there's uniformity in what is going on in the states. And we are also we have offices in the 36 states. So the state coordinators of all the 36 states are part of this process. And also, one of the measures we have also taken, there is this State Security and Human Rights Committee now set up in all the states, because it's not only a matter of dealing with the backlog. How do we move forward from here? We are saying that if all these complaints were being dealt with as they were rising, we wouldn't get to this stage. So how do we deal with that? So looking forward, what we have done is, at the meeting at the National Economic Council, is that all states will set up a State Security and Human Rights Committee made up of the leadership of all the security agencies in the state, and then there will now be established the Office of State Ombudsman, a public complaint, which will receive complaints on human rights violations. Human Rights Commission is already in all the states receiving complaints on Human Rights Commission. So every month, the State Ombudsman and the National Human Rights Commission and civil society will present a joint report with recommendations on any violations reported to that State Security and Human Rights Committee, headed by the governor. So it will be dealt with right away. So this accumulation of atrocities and violations all over the years will at least be contained. Maybe one or two will still fall out of it, but if the complaint falls out this month, it can come up next month. So that is for sustainable basis.
Yeah, Ojoku, sorry, Joma, I just want very valuable points you talked about here now in terms of going forward. We can interrogate some of the aspects in detail. Lagos State has had an ombudsman office for some years now. I don't know the level of interaction between your commission and that ombudsman office, but the news framework that you have just talked about is very useful. But is this being communicated to the harsh and SARS protesters? I know that they have escalated their demands, but primarily to say, look, in the absence of trust, to say you promised this in the past, nothing really worked. Now you're saying those 5 for 5 will be met. What you have just outlined, now some of them, of course, as recently as yesterday, are the harsh and SARS protesters aware of these new developments? And by the way, if you could just recap them, what is needed to be done. All 36 states of the Federation, plus FCT, I believe,
yes,
to have their judicial panels of inquiry. Yes. Time frame has not been indicated.
6 months.
6 months. Okay, that was what was stated earlier. And so on and so forth. What needs to be done? You know, who needs to take a petition? Collaboration with the NBA and I say, just go over it again one more time.
Yeah, like in the national dailies on Monday, Authority newspaper, on Tuesday in Daily Trust, and yesterday it was in Vanguard. We published call for memoranda from members of the public outlining that if you have these complaints in the FCT or anywhere in the country, please petition to the National Human Rights Commission, independent investigative panel on human rights violations by SARS. That has been going on. Now, it says if you have any complaints against SARS or any of the police tactical units, please bring that information and then we'll be able to look at it. There are members of the police in the panel that will help us access these officers, because that is always one of the challenges. Public Complaints Commission is represented in the panel. The civil society is represented in the panel. Nigerian youth are represented in the panel. So we are going to look at all these complaints. Now, to help members of the public articulate their, because we know that some of the people who are complaining may not even be able to write these complaints. So part of our complaint treatment mechanism is that those who cannot write, they can be assisted to write. Now, so we are collaborating with the Nigerian Bar Association. I spoke with Olumide, the president, on this. We have drawn up a memorandum of understanding that NBA should open its doors to assist Nigerians who have genuine complaints.
Pro bono?
On pro bono basis. Okay. That is the whole idea, you know, to, first of all, articulate their complaint properly in a way that the facts will be clear and they can be assisted. Can
you take that again? Because they need to know that they can go and meet a pro bono lawyer and it can be done for free.
Yes. Pro bono means that it's going to be free. Yes. And NBA is ready to offer these services nationwide to all complainants, so that they can state clearly the issues they have, how they were maltreated, how their rights were violated, and some basic information, because at times there's an information you give, it will not be clear to help the panel assist you. So the lawyers will guide them, okay, at what time did this happen? You know, what kind of injury did you receive? You know, did you report to the hospital, for instance? Is there evidence that you had an injury? And all those kind of things. Do you have a body scar? You know, can you take a picture of the body scar and act? Can you show that before then you didn't have this body scar? You know, some of those small details that will help to substantiate your case easily before the panel. Lawyers can guide you to do this. So MB has agreed to offer these services, thanks to the present leadership of the Nigerian Bar Association. And then when these things come, the panel will also give fair hearing. The panel must give the police officers' complaint fair hearing, because that's their constitutional right. You know, so that is the nature of the, and they can also be represented by a lawyer of their choice before the panel. Now, what we don't want is undue technicalities, because these panels,
bottlenecks.
not bottlenecks, we're not going to start again, then a ruling will be given, there will be appeal on the ruling to the Supreme Court, and then we'll have 6 months to deal with these issues.
Why I'm saying this is most of these commissions are in the city.
Yeah.
Some of these atrocities are committed in the local government area at the grassroots.
Sure.
If it's going to take 6 months, that means he has to go back and forth, because he doesn't live in the city. So can we have a commission in some of these big local governments in the country so that they can just go there, lay their complaints, and they are heard? Don't you think that would be a good move?
It's going to be difficult to have panels in all the big local governments.
Not all.
But well, the structure now is to deal with it at the state capitals, where the structures are. Yes. And if there's need to assist, victims to access, that will be considered. Yes. For instance, things like transportation and like this issue of helping them to articulate the advance freely and defend is also an assistance because, so...
Okay, Tony Ojoku.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify this before we go on this short break. The Human Rights Commission has its own committee. We had that report on our bulletin this morning. Is that committee running parallel with the judicial panels of inquiry in the states?
Exactly, it's running parallel.
Okay, and then the collaboration that you were calling for, or that you already have indicated between the Commission and the NBA, is it solely to facilitate the work of the committee of the Commission, or to facilitate also the work of the judicial panels of inquiry?
All the panels running on in all the states.
In all the states.
Yes, because NBA is in all the states. That's the beauty.
Fantastic.
So those in Enugu will be helping those in Enugu. Those in Aba will be helping. So that is how it will go.
All right. By the way, Juma, just a judicial panel of inquiry. It's a quasi-court, so it has the full powers of the court. It can issue orders. It can summon witnesses, summon appearances, and all that. And if you don't behave yourself, you act in contempt, and you can be sent to a correctional center, and you'll be able to break out of that jail. All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, and for you just joining us, we've been discussing NSAS and the way forward. Professor Osita, I see you're back with us now via Zoom. And you were talking about there was no proper mapping of how things would evolve according to what happened on Tuesday night. You were not able to land on that. Can we still get you to talk about it?
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, what I was trying to say then is that if we, all actors, mapped what was evolving or what was likely to evolve, it would have been possible for us to prevent some of the unsavory aspects that later came up. For example, if we are protesting in an environment that is already saturated with people without jobs, and we have the background, the setting is that we have insecurity across the country. Of course, you know that these things will always link up, and that the things that are promoting insecurity are still around when we are trying to conduct a peaceful protest. So how this connect one thing with the other, we will have been able to anticipate how difficult the situation will evolve over time. So in my view, we pray that we never get into this kind of situation again, but there were clear early warning signs. The early warning signs were palpable. And so we will have been able, in that context, to draw out all the scenarios that were likely to come up, and then also prepare for how to deal with them. The way it is now, what has played out up to now is as if we were taken by surprise. And for me, as a social scientist, I do not think that that was a proper way to allow ourselves, to be involved in all of this, because the consequences can be far more than what we think, for this country. And I mean, looking into the future, we must be ready to engage the scenarios that are likely to come out of any kind of mass action, such as we have just, we are going through now. So that's the point I was trying to make. And for me, the issue of early warning signs is very important, because no conflict happens without signs. And unless we take the signs seriously, we will always, be taken by surprise, as if there were no signs. And I think that in this country, we have always behaved as if things always suddenly happen. And this is not right for us, because we are a big state in the world, in the continent, and not to talk of West Africa. Part of what scenarios we have built is that how even West Africa will be impacted immediately if something goes wrong with Nigeria. And many people don't think about this. They just see themselves as Nigerians in this space called Nigeria. If anything happens to this country, West Africa is gone in a matter of weeks. And this is important. So we have a responsibility as a country, all actors, to know that the future of this region, the West Africa region, is with Nigeria. And somebody said, it was Mandela who said some time ago that until Nigeria becomes responsible, Africa will not find its way, into the global Committee of Nations. And I think that this is a very important statement, and we should look at ourselves like that, so that we do not, put ourselves in a situation where we begin to act like any of these other, states that do not have the kind of integrity that we have as a country.
Professor Oshita, thank you very much. I just wanted, so that we can maximize the clarity of your connection at this time, can we begin to pick up the pieces from the crisis? You listened to the number of measures outlined by the Executive Secretary of the Human Rights Commission. And of course, we've asked him to repeat those measures. In addition to what he has said, what more would you like to see?
Well, what the ES, Executive Secretary of National Human Rights Commission, has said borders on processes and procedures that are, being put in place. But I also think that on the flanks of that, we have a robust National Assembly made up of Senate and House of Representatives. Now, I think that even before we got to where we are, the representatives of all the constituencies will have been able to engage their constituents. All these youths have one thing or the other to do with the representatives of their own areas. What messages do National Assembly members have for their constituents? They were not supposed to wait and watch the way the rest of us without platforms were waiting and watching. They were supposed to engage them, because that would help them inform government of what is happening at those levels. But all we saw was, everyone kept mute until the assembly began, to sit. I think that even now, the representatives can still engage their constituents and get them to understand why the protests can be, muted for now, so that we clear the dust and find a pathway forward. It is important. I'm happy that the whole country has recognized the very, solid points that the youth have made in terms of, trying to get the police to be better for all of us. So I think that those are some of the parts. And again, our institutions, we have a national peace policy draft for this country. It is lying there in the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Nobody has asked what that document can be used to do for the country. Because unless we have a peace policy for this country, people will not know how to align themselves in times of conflict. So I believe that we should, pick all the things that are available in different institutions of this country and see how these can add up in terms of having, a kind of sustainable peace path for going forward.
Okay, Professor Osita, thank you so much. We now join Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst, is joining us via Zoom. Jide, you've been listening to our guests talking about the way forward, reasons why these things went awry, and let's get your views on the way forward on this NSAS saga now.
The way forward is very clear. Quite a number of people, and like I said in my column in the Punch yesterday, a number of things needs to be done, and very expeditiously. The Nigerian youths are very cynical about all the actions and decisions of this administration. I mean, I listened to the Executive Secretary, National Human Rights Commission, very, very lucid, very concise, very elucidating explanations and presentation. But you see, we have moved away from these PowerPoint presentations that you would dazzle and, all the razzmatazz. People want to see concrete actions. What are the deliverables? What are the timelines? Yes, you said Judicial Commission of Inquiry, but my brother there, Benson Olubo, raised very vital points about the legal framework and the connectivity and the connecting the doors of all of the legal. Why should National Human Rights Commission not have evolved since 2015, 5 years ago? Why should it not have evolved? Are we in debt of credible Nigerians to be on the board of National Human Rights Commission? Look at the infighting between the IGP and the Nigeria Police Service Commission. Can the presidency come in and resolve that conflict? Because it's impacting on the effective performance. We have seen in media reportage some actions of the IG that the court has rescinded, and the Police Service Commission is now saying, okay, all the 10,000 you recruited last year were wrongfully done. The promotion you did was wrongfully done, and all of this. This is where we need best synergy. The other point I need to make is to appeal to our president to please come on and make a national broadcast that will calm frayed nerves. This issue is already assuming ethno-religious dimension, and it is very dangerous. Listen to the tape released by Nnamdi Kanu. Listen, and I worry because, like Professor Oshita said, there are already elements that can cash in on any peaceful protest in Nigeria. Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. Nigeria has a high rate of unemployment, 27.1%. Nigeria is battling high cost of living. People have pent up anger. And this thing we saw would have even happened even if there is no NSAS protest. People were waiting on Nigeria Labour Congress to go on that strike and on protest for them to cash in on this. Luckily, government was able to get NLC not to go on strike. But why they failed to get NLC, why they succeeded in getting NLC not to go on strike, with this protest, it provided the needed ignition to cause maximum havoc on the Nigerian state. So the president needs to address Nigeria. Why should it take the ECOWAS chairman, Nana Akufo-Addo, appealing to our president to talk to Nigerians, to talk to Nigerian youths on clear-cut, actionable timelines, deliverables, milestones that this administration intends to reform the entire police structure, and not only that, to also ensure good governance. Because this protest, even though it's coming under the platform of NSAS, it is all about bye-bye to bad governance. And that's why you see the interest of some perceived enemy of Nigerians being attacked. And it is wrong. It is wrong.
Mr. Jide Ojo, Mr. Jide Ojo, we are running out of time, and I believe Nigerians have really understood your, train of, argument here. Let's come back to the studio where Dr. Benson Ologbo is saying, Jide Ojo said, no more razzmatazz. The truth has to be on the table, and the people are calling out, the international community are calling out for the president to address the nation. Which way forward on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've already said that. I want to thank the Executive Secretary of National Human Rights Commission for the way he outlined what he hopes will be done. Like some people have also rightly pointed out also, the problem we have is not just the policies, but the political will. And unfortunately, some of these issues actually are beyond him. He cannot, he can coordinate. Yes. But what happens in those 37 judicial panels is actually beyond him. So nobody knows when they will be able to submit their reports to the National Human Rights Commission to collate. These issues were actually forestalled. If you read the National Security Strategy 2019 at page 57, it says we have 63% of the population is youths, 63%. Then if you go down, it gives you issues of security, issues we could encounter with a huge youth population, unemployment, lack of opportunities, and all those things. It's there. And this is the National Security Strategy that the president presented to the public. Apparently, I don't know, nobody has really gone to look at what was predicted. So what is happening now is not new. It was there. Not that it was there. It is in the National Security Strategy that they looked around and said, if you have a 63% of population that is youth, and there's unemployment, there is vulnerability, that the possibility of agitations can actually cause problems, and it's there. So what I'm saying is, one of the key problems we have in Nigeria is not lack of good laws. We have very good laws. It's not lack of policies. We have good policies. There is lack of political will. There is lack of empathy. And there is lack of democracy really working.
Okay, Benson Olugbo, thank you very much. I just want to get a closing thoughts of the Executive Secretary of the Human Rights Commission. Earlier, you were talking about the need for government to find out what happened at the Admiralty Toll Plaza on the Lekki-Ekpe Expressway on Tuesday night. But we've also seen subsequent events, particularly yesterday in Lagos. And before then, of course, we also saw events in Benin. Usually, when these arson and looting incidents take place, the tendency is for everyone to say, look, go and lick your own wounds. What would you like to see differently this time?
There's no question of going to lick your own wounds. The government is supposed to provide people security. The law enforcement agents were supposed to protect these protesters. They were supposed to line them up and make sure that they were not infiltrated by hoodlums, and they failed to do that. So as long as they failed to do that, they must bear the responsibility for that. So for me, anybody who has lost his property in this process has a right to ask government to, because what is the duty of government? Protection of life and property. The welfare of the people is the primary essence of government. So, but let me deal a little bit with the issue of reconstitution of the Governing Council of National Human Rights Commission.
Very briefly.
I think we want to call on the government to reconstitute the Governing Council. It is very, very essential. What is not correct is to say that because there's no Governing Council, the place should be scrapped. Because the law establishing the National Human Rights Commission made it a perpetual succession. So it exists whether there's Governing Council or not. And as long as the commission is there, commission is bigger than the Governing Council. So the commission is in existence, is a perpetual succession, and it must continue to protect the rights of Nigerians. So it is good to have the Governing Council, but it's not correct to say that because there's no Governing Council, the commission is abrogated.
It's in stasis.
Yes.
All right. Tony Ojoku, Executive Secretary, National Human Rights Commission, our deep thanks to you for being around this morning.
Thank you.
And we also like to appreciate Dr. Benson Olugbo, Executive Secretary, Claim Foundation. And from Jos, Plateau State, we're joined by the Honorable Commissioner for Information, Dan Manjang. Thank you for your perspective. And via Skype, we're joined by Professor Oshita, former DG Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, and now Executive Director, Ubuntu Center for Africa Peace Building and Development. And lastly, Jide Ojo, a public affairs analyst, also with us via Zoom this morning. Gentlemen, on that note, we'd like to thank you.
We have to acknowledge the tweets.
Yes, well, we had some tweets. If we are unable to read them, Ibrahim Boduaje, Chris Simeon, Suleiman Babagana, Abosade, Leo Fadaka, Yunusa Idris, Dele Jack Solomon, Cecilia Okoroma, Adamo Estefanos. Some of the issues you raised were touched on by our guests, and in fact, they went and elaborated much further, including the very useful information given to us by the ES of the Human Rights Commission. So that does it for us today on Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks for being with us. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. Until then, I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Juma Yusuf. Do have a wonderful day. And remember to stay safe.